history and movement. What is art movement? An art movement is a trend or a style of art with a defined goal and philosophy that is chosen and pursued by a group of artists over a period of time that can range from months to years or even decades. It also refers to when a big number of artists who are alive at the same time adopt a certain, easily discernible form or style of art that can be distinguished from current styles and methods. This technique then becomes extremely popular, defining an entire generation of painters. Here are the following art movements. Prehistoric art, a term that refers to the Stone Age, Paleolithic, and Neolithic art and artifacts, literally referring to the time before recorded history. As the first building blocks of art history, prehistoric artifacts provide crucial insights into the origin of image and craft making. They take the form of tools and small objects, as well as the select few architectural ruins. Art from this period was a powerful form of communicating information between tribes and generations. For instance, the Lascaux caves in southern France demonstrate hunting techniques through the use of basic narrative structures and iconography dating back to 15,000 BC. Another iconic prehistoric artwork is the Venus of Willendorf, 24,000 to 22,000 BC, a bulbous palm-sized figurine of a woman true to be a symbol of fertility and also the earliest surviving depiction of a female nude. Ancient art between approximately 5000 BC and 300 AD. Advanced civilization, generally those with written language, thrive in Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, Sumeria, Akkadian, Mexico, Rome, Japan, China, and India. Art played an important role in these growing societies by providing a means to enforce religious and political order. For example, one of the most famous artwork from the ancient Mesopotamia, often called the cradle of civilization, is the Code of Hammurabi, a set of laws carved in stone and adorned by an image of King Hammurabi and the Mesopotamian god Shabbas. Similarly, the art of ancient Egypt includes symbolic imaginary alongside text that tells stories and exalts rules, gods, and goddesses. Although prehistoric human-made art as far back 40,000 years ago, ancient art is considered by some to be the foundation of all art history, with its techniques, form, and subject matters continuing to inform the art of today. Medieval art, a term encompassing the wide variety of art and architecture produced during the Middle Ages, a prolonged period of economic and social stagnation in Europe and Eastern Mediterranean. The span roughly from the fall of Roman Empire in 476 AD to early ages of Renaissance 1400s. True art historians debate the specific stylistic and chronological division of medieval, a general accepted sequence identities the following periods: early medieval art, Romanesque art, and Gothic art. Renaissance art. Renaissance art, painting, sculpture, architecture, music, and literature produced during the 14th, 15th, and 2nd centuries in Europe under the combined influence of an increased awareness of nature, a revival of classical learning, and a more individualistic view of man. Scholars no longer believe that the Renaissance marked a bankrupt break of medieval values, as it suggests by the French word Renaissance, literally rebirth rather. Historical sources suggest that the interest in the nature, humanistic learning, and individualism was already present in the late medieval period and become dominant in 15th and 16th century. Italy, concurrent with the social and economic changes such as the circularization of daily life, the rise of rational money credit economy, and greatly increased social mobility. Mannerism art. The term Mannerism describes the style of paintings and bronze sculpture on this tour. Derived from Italian maniera, meaning simply style, Mannerism is sometimes defined as the stylish style for its emphasis of self-conscious artifice over realistic depiction. The 16th century artist and the critic Vasari, himself a Mannerist, believed that excellence in painting, demanding refinement, riches of invention, and virtuoso technique, criteria that emphasized the artist's intellect. More important than his carefully recreated observation of nature was the artist's mental conception of its elaboration. This intellectual bias was, in part, a natural consequence of art's new status in society. No longer regarded as craftsmen, painters, and sculptors took their place with scholars, poets, and humanists in a climate that forests an appreciation of elegance, complexity, and even precocity. Baroque art. The term Baroque derived from Portuguese barroco, meaning irregular pearl of stone, refers to the cultural and art movement that characterized Europe from early 17th and mid-18th century. Baroque emphasizes dramatic, exaggerated motion and clear, easily interpreted detail due to its exuberant irregularities. Baroque art has often been defined as being bizarre or uneven. Rococo art. Rococo art, sometimes called a feminist version of Baroque style, is associated with aristocracy. Typically, the paintings depict aristocrats or aristocratic leisure time activities like courtship rituals, picnics in harmonious natural environment, excursions, and romantic places. The paintings feature beautiful acrobats and gorgeous clothing. The figures are tall and slender, elegant, and graceful. Neoclassicism art. Neoclassical art arose in opposition to the overly decorative and godly style of Rococo and Baroque that were infusing society with a vanity art culture based on personal conceits and whimsy. It brought about a general revival in classical thought that is mirrored what is going on in political and social arenas on the time, leading to the French Revolution. The primary neoclassicists believed was the art should express the ideal virtues in life and should improve the viewer by imparting a memorializing message. It had the power to civilize, reform, and transform society, as society itself was being transformed by new approaches to government and the rising forces of industrial revolution driven by scientific discovery and invention. Romanticism art. Romanticism was a cultural movement that started in Europe. It was somewhat of a reaction of industrial revolution which occurred during some time period. The movement affected philosophical thinking, literature, music, and art. Romantic art focused on emotion, feelings, and moods of all kinds, including spirituality, imagination, mystery, and fervor. The subject matter varied widely, including landscape, religion, revolution, and peaceful beauty. The brushwork for romantic art became looser and less precise. The great romantic artist Caspar David Friedrich summed of Romanticism, saying artist's feeling is his law. Realism art. Realism is broadly considered the beginning of modern art. Literally, this is due to its conviction that everyday life and the modern world with suitable subject of art. Philosophically, realism embraced the progressive aim of modernism, seeking new truths through the strict examination and overturning of traditional system of values and beliefs. Realism concerned itself with how life is structured society, economically, politically, and culturally in the mid-19th century. This led in unflinching, sometimes ugly portrayals of life in pleasant moments and the use of dark, earthy palettes and confronted high art ultimate ideals of beauty. Art Novea. Art Novea, ornamental style of art that flourished between about 1890 and 1910 throughout Europe and United States. Art Novea is characterized by its use of long, sinuous, organic line and was employed most often in architectures, interior design, jewelry, and glass design, posters, and illustration. It was a deliberate attempt to create a new style, free of the initiative, historicisms, and dominant much of 19th century art and design. About this time, the term Art Novea was coined in Belgium by periodical L'Art Moderne to describe the work of artist group Les Banks and in Paris by S. Bing, who named his gallery L'Art Novea. Impressionism art. Impressionism was a radical art movement that began in late 1800s, centered primarily around Parisian painters. Impressionists rebelled against classical subject matter and embraced modernity, desiring to create work that reflected the world in which they lived. Uniting them was a focus on how white could define a moment in time, with color providing definition instead of black lines. The Impressionists emphasized the practice of plein air paintings, of paintings outside. Initially derided by critics, Impressionism has since been embraced as one of the most popular and influential art styles in Western history. Post-Impressionism art. Post-Impressionism encompasses a wide range of distinct artistic styles that all share the common motivation of corresponding to the optically of the Impressionist movement. The stylist variation assembled under general banner of post-impressionism range from the scientifically oriented neo-impressionisms of George Seurat to the lost symbolisms of Paul Gauguin, but all concentrated on the subjective vision of artists. The movement ushers in the era during which painting transited in traditional role as a windows onto the world and instead become a window into the artist's mind and soul. The far-reaching aesthetic impact on post-impressionism influenced groups that arose during the turn of the 20th century like expressionists as well as more contemporary movements like the idea related in feminist art. Fauvism art. Fauvism is art movement and style that was established toward the beginning of 20th century, pioneered by the likes of Henri Matisse and André Derain. In its early years, Fauvism was predominantly uplifted in French artists. Fauvist art is characterized by its bold color, textures, brushwork, and non-naturalistic depiction. In some cases, Fauvist artists emerged as an extension of Impressionist artists working at the turn of the century. Like the way they paint directly from nature, Fauvists are sometimes associated with post-impressionism. However, unlike the Impressionists, the Fauvists paid particular attention to capturing emotions in their subject. Often painting portraits, landscape, and nudes, the Fauvists enhanced the colors and tone of the natural world, whilst closely observing scientific color theories that had been developed in the previous century. Fauvism combined so many of the art movements that proceed in borrowing everything from German Expressionism to Neo-Impressionism. Expressionism art. Expressionism is considered more an international tendency than a coherent art movement, which was particularly influential at the beginning of the 20th century. It spanned various fields: art, literature, music, theater, and architecture. Expressionism is a complex and vast term that has meant different things at different times. However, when we ask of expressionist art, we tend to think either about the artistic tendency which followed as a reaction to Impressionism in France or about the movement which emerged in Germany and Austria in 20th century. The term is so elastic that it accommodates artists ranging with Vincent van Gogh of Egon Schiele and Venice Kadiskai. Cubism art. Cubism is a style of painting in which the subject matter is presented as geometric form shown from multiple simultaneous vantage points. But there's more to it than that. Philosophically, it's a theory of pictorial democracy where every aesthetic element is valued the same. Intellectually, it is an admission that life is complex and can be only understood from multiple perspectives. Metaphorically, Cubism is the internet. It is a tool for fully exploring a subject, that not to get a surface image of what it seems to be, but rather to understand its essence and to achieve a vision of its complete. Surrealism art. Founded by poet André Breton in Paris in 1924, Surrealism was an artistic and literary movement. It proposed the Enlightenment, the influential 17th and 18th century intellectual movement that championed reason and individualism had suppressed the superior qualities of the irrational, unconscious mind. Surrealism's goal was to liberate thought, language, and human experience from the oppressive boundaries of rationalism. Breton had studied medicine and psychiatry and was well-versed in the psychoanalytical writings of Sigmund Freud. He was particularly interested in the idea that the unconscious mind will produce dreams, was the source of artistic creativity. A devoted Marxist, Breton was intended Surrealism to be a revolutionary movement capable in unleashing the minds of the masses from the rational order of society. Abstract art. Abstract art, also commonly referred to non-objective art, is painting, sculpture, or graphic art that does not attempt to represent an accurate depiction of visual reality. By definition, to abstract means to extract or remove one thing from another. Abstract art draws the fundamental elements of paintings such as color, shape, and light and renders subject matters as pared down in distinct forms. The term is also used to clarify art that does not take its inspiration from external physical or visual sources, just as geometric shape, highlighting the point that abstract art is not representational and could be created from the real-world object or no object at all. Abstract artists strive to non-representational, which also allowed their work to be interpreted based upon the pure individual set of experience and associations. Where Cubist artists like Pablo Picasso presented an exaggerated or distorted view of the world, abstract artists instead use form and color as the focus of the subject of a piece, void of conceptual realism. Op art. Op art, also called optical art, branch of mid-20th century geometric abstract art that deals with optical illusion, achieved through the symmetric and precise manipulation of shapes and colors. The effect of op art can be based either in perspective illusion or chromatic tension. In painting, the dominant medium of op art, the surface tension is usually maximized to the point at which an actual presentation of flickering is perceived by human eye. It is concerned with ordinary abstract formal relationships. Pop art is indirectly related to such other 20th century styles of Upism, Constructivism, Suprematism, and Futurism, particularly latter because it emphasized on pictorial movement and dynamism. The painters of this movement differed from either artists working in geometric style. However, it is for manipulation of formal relationship in order to evoke conceptual illusion, ambiguities, and contradictions in the visions of the viewer. Pop art or means popular art. Pop art movement of the late 1950s and 60s that inspired by commercial and popular culture, although it did not have the specific style or attitude. Pop art was defined as diverse response to the post-war era's commodity-driven values, often using commonplace objects such as comic strips, soup cans, road signs, and hamburgers as subject matters or as part of the work. Art povera, the Italian phrase for poor art or impoverished art, was one of the most significant and influential avant-garde movement to emerge in Southern Europe in the late 1960s. It included the work of around a dozen Italian artists whose most distinctly recognizable trait was their use of commonplace materials that evoke a pre-industrial age, such as earth, rocks, clothing, paper, and rope. Literally, poor or cheap materials that they repurpose for their practices. These practices represent the challenge to establish notion of value and property, as well as subtly critiquing the industrialization and mechanization of Italy at the same time. Their work marked a reaction against the modernization of abstract painting that had dominant European art in 1950s, which they distinguished themselves by focusing on the sculpture work rather than painting. The group also rejected American minimalism, in particular what they perceived as enthusiasm for technology and dominance over the artwork. Whilst in the respect, arte povera echoes post-minimalist tendencies of American art of the 1960s in its opposition to modernization and technology. Its evocations of the past, locality, and memory have distinctly Italian aesthetic and strategic characteristics. Minimalism art. Minimalism describes movement and various forms of art and design, especially visual art and music, where the work is set out to expose the essential or essence of identity of a subject through eliminating all non-essential forms, featuring or concept. As a specific movement in art is identified with developed in post-World War II Western art, most strongly with American visual art in 1960s and early 1970s. Conceptual art. Conceptual art can be and can look like almost anything. This is because unlike a painter or sculptor who will think about this best they can express their idea using paint or sculpture materials and techniques. A conceptual artist uses weather materials in whatever form is more appropriate to putting their idea across. This could be anything from a performance to a written descriptions. Although there is no one style of form used by conceptual artists, from late 1960s certain trends emerge. Contemporary art. A reference to contemporary art meaning the art of today, more broadly includes artwork produced during the late 20th and early 21st century. It generally defines art produced after the modern art movement to present day. However, modern artwork is not just art produced during a specific time frame. This genre of art does not its own approach or style that distinguishes from others. Yet, this style of art is difficult to define because it includes such variety. Some argue that the basic approach and goal of modern art is to challenge the nature of artwork itself. It can also make the viewer question what defines art. Therefore, this style of art is not particularly uniform, and it may be more challenging to precisely describe than any other genre of art. Additionally, there are several major reasons why contemporary art is important to society. For instance, it is meant to express oneself as is a way to provide social and cultural commentary.